All right, gang. I have with me, super excited to talk to a cinematographer for a new horror film that is out. And you guys will be able to check it out. And the premise is right up my alley. The movie is called That's a Wrap. And our guest for this show is Marcus Friedlander. Man, how you doing? Thank you for coming.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me on. Very happy to chat about That's a Wrap.
The film looks like, just by judging on the trailer and reading some articles on different sites about it, seems like it would have been a blast and a half to make a horror movie with this premise. But if no one has any information on it yet, what is this movie about?
It's a good question. This is a meta horror comedy about a horror production company that made a horror film called That's a Wrap and is throwing the wrap party. And at the wrap party, the killer's there disguised as the in costume and is killing off the actors one by one.
It reminded me
Mm.
so much of the scene from Scream 3
Mm.
when with like Patrick Wilburn is the bodyguard, and you had like fake Gale and Gale, just like how the cast was reacting, in the certain scenes that I've seen in the trailer and
Mm.
everything, like over the topness mixed with like slasher. It looks like it is going to be one that has a lot of like repeatability factor to it.
Absolutely. And the Scream comparison isn't a coincidence. The first Scream is Marcel, the director, is his favorite film of all time, and
Right
the
on.
Scream franchise was definitely a big influence on the film.
The Scream 3 has always gotten a bad shake. I love Scream 3. I don't know if
Mm.
it's just being, film student and loving like going on the back lots and stuff, but that whole premise, I loved it. So the fact
Mm.
that you guys took, which I know a lot of like fellow podcasters and our team does, and you made a movie based upon like an indie horror company
Mhm.
making their horror movie and having it happen to them. I love it, man. How did you find yourself coming aboard the project?
So I got there kind of circuitously, actually. I was somewhat aware of Marcel through lots of mutual friends. DP that he had worked with a couple of times is a friend of mine who done a ton of work with each other as well. And then Sarah French, who's one of the lead actors on the film and also one of the producers. Her and I did a film August of 2 years ago now, August before we shot that summer for That's a Wrap. Um, had a great time working together. And then when looked like they were going to go, Marcel and his team were going to go for a new DP for That's a Wrap. Sarah put out my name, and then also another producer that I worked with, Brendan Petrizzo, who I've done a dozen films with as well, who's good friends with Marcel, also put out my name. And, the double recommendation was enough, and I got the call and interviewed, and rest is history.
Right on, man.
Mm.
Well, congratulations on you guys finishing the film and it getting all done.
Mm.
And that is an accomplishment in itself that only people who have made a film can appreciate how much work truly goes in to
Absolutely.
making one. So that's something to definitely be super stoked about.
Mm.
And the film being, you said it perfectly, so meta in the fact that it's, the slasher movie inside of a slasher movie, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he being a fan of the Scream franchise, was there like or is there, I should say, like Scream Easter eggs or anything, or was it purely like an aesthetic premise type thing?
It was, I'd say, I wouldn't say purely, I'd definitely say mostly an aesthetic premise. There are little Easter eggs, sprinkled throughout. Joe Netter, the writer, every scene, every line of dialogue is just some little, reference to something. It may not be Scream. We did obviously a big Psycho reference.
Hmm.
Suspiria is obviously a huge reference for the film as a whole, the look and the tone,
Hmm.
especially all the stuff with rain and colored rain and, those types of things. So
Hmm.
there are definitely a lot of little Easter eggs for students of horror to find, but I'd say for the most part it was just aesthetic influence rather than the point of the film was to find Easter eggs.
There's definitely something that stands out in the trailer is, I mean, you just hit it, like the Suspiria vibe with the lighting
Mm-hmm.
and the colorization. Was that something that going in that they knew like, hey, we want to frame it like this, we want it to be lit like this type of a
Mhm.
thing?
100%, yeah. From the very start, at least to my knowledge, the very, very start of this film was we want to do a Giallo-esque meta slasher horror, Scream meets Suspiria.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I got the call is because I did have done a lot of work with color and those types of, very dark and very colorful at the same time, especially in the horror world. I've actually done different films that were inspired by Suspiria previously, so this wasn't new for me at all. And then the film I did with Sarah was also similar, heavily inspired with colors, heavily took place mostly inside one car, and we motivated lots of different ways to change colors inside that car that I was very happy with. Definitely helped kind of carry the tone over the course of the film. And Sarah, having seen me do that, said, "Hey, this guy is probably the right person for the Giallo job."
Was that, is
Mm,
that daunting at all? Like, because when you say that name,
mm,
Suspiria, or even the Jello genre,
mm,
I've gotten to talk to Barbara from Suspiria a few different times,
mm,
and like Dario Argento's name is such like renowned, like
mm.
you say that name and it's almost like the Italian Hitchcock. Like
No, 100%, yeah.
you don't just say that name.
Mm.
So when you're referencing that for you as a cinematographer, does that bring, I'm sure it brings excitement that you're getting to do something, in that vein, but is that daunting to know?
It's definitely daunting. The whole world is about, not just film, but the world as a whole is walking in the footsteps of giants, the masters who came before you, kind of emulating what they did and then taking it to the one step, the next step level that you can find type of thing. And
Hmm.
it's funny that you mention how you described Argento as the Italian Hitchcock, because the scene that was actually most intimidating for me was the Psycho homage scene, because it is, for the exact reasons you mentioned, it is so specifically iconic in the imagery.
Yeah.
Like the nice thing about Suspiria is it's while there are very specific ideas for how a movie is lit and shot in a kind of this Giallo Suspiria type of format, the images themselves aren't exactly specific. So as
Mm,
long as we hit the colors and the tones and the ideas, and a lot of it started with the costuming and the set anyway, so that all that was done before I even walked onto the project.
mm.
As long as we hit those elements right, it would all kind of wrap up together very nicely as a giallo. But when we did specifically the Psycho homage scene, I knew we really had to nail exact frames, exactly the way people were expecting to see them. Otherwise, the whole sequence wouldn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
Mm,
tall task, man. Like
definitely.
we going through film school and stuff, I've kind of like told myself it'd be cool to try to do, short films in every subgenre of horror.
Mm,
And by God, like lighting class was the vein of my existence. Like I have people lucky enough to come and help me with lighting now when I'm
mm,
doing a project because it's lighting, obviously cinematography, but like lighting and sound are like the two in post that like if the lighting looks shitty or if the noise or whatever, like those are things that like you can't go back and fix, or if you do, it's a bunch of money and a bunch, a lot of time for a lot of people to,
mm.
fuck, we didn't light it right. We got to like call them back in and redo all that. I've had that happen. I know that feeling. It's not a good one.
It's not down. Yeah.
And so man, the fact that you guys are literally taking Argento style and one of the most iconic Hitchcock sequences and blending the two, it's like, how do I make this honors test even harder? Shit, let's throw
Exactly.
this on top of it.
And
Uh,
what I found so funny about combining those two ideas is what they were asking, the director and writer were asking me to do was find an RGB color wash that makes sense for a black and white homage, which I
mm,
thought was a giant contradiction. And, how do
yeah,
you do a
yeah.
superior version of a black and white scene? And it actually led to a really happy coincidence where when you're doing big effect stuff, especially big color based effect stuff, you have to
Mhm.
be very careful with the color tone to use for the blood and gore scenes because if you're lighting with warmer tones or with kind of normal neutral color temperature type of tones, the
Hmm.
blood that the effects team makes offset will look the way it's supposed to look when they bring it onto set. But if you
Hmm.
do huge color washes, it totally changes people's color perceptions. And if you have very cool tones on there, the red blood starts, because color is reflected light. If you're not reflecting any red, there's no red going to come out. So if you light a scene with just blue and then put red blood there, it kind of looks like black sludge on the way back, to the lens,
Oh,
which normally is a thing you have to avoid. But particularly for that sequence, it happened to work so perfectly because one, it's a shower scene, so cooler tones make sense in that world anyways. But
right.
two, to make the same blood that we had in a previous scene that was bright red feel desaturated and feel like the chocolate syrup type of stuff that they used to use, lighting the whole scene with a two-tone blue, like it's like a blue and a cyan, kind of a deeper blue and a cyan on top of it,
Right.
gave us this kind of monochromatic, washed out while still being RGB and colorful version of a black and white scene. I was really happy with the way that came out.
Damn, that's an awesome behind the scenes story right there.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you mentioned that this was a couple years ago now that you shot this.
Uh, a year and a half ago,
So
little
you're
bit less, a
com-
year and like 3 months ago.
so
Mm-hmm.
you're coming right out of the tail end of
Mm-hmm.
Corona restrictions being like super locked down status.
Mm-hmm.
Was this affected or were there challenges based upon the pandemic or were we pretty much out of it?
We were pretty much out of it at that point. I was also lucky enough to shoot pretty much through the entire pandemic, doing super low budget stuff for like Asylum. It was a big, pretty much the only people shooting at the time, or shooting narrative at least. So
Hmm.
I was very used to working under the, almost draconian at times. It felt like restrictions when it came to work. Only the different pods of people allowed on set at certain times. So like the art team has the set, and we all have to sit there, tapping our watches before I can let the G&E team, go and do their,
Right.
all that was miserable. This was, especially because it was a very small crew, and in I think it was this 2020, yeah, July 2022. So yeah, we were pretty far past God,
Oh,
it's 2023 already. Where does the time go?
yeah, seriously. Seriously. Um, how many days did you guys shoot for?
That one was only 8 days. Very quick, pretty
That's
much.
that's a wrap or the asylum one you're talking about.
That's wrap. It was
Wow,
only
eight
8 days, yeah.
days. Wow.
And it was written so yes, it'd been nice to have more time, of course. It'd be always nice to have more time, but the way the script was written and structured, it's a movie that absolutely could and should have been shot in 8 days. We
Hmm.
added to like 10 or 11 days, it would just make certain things kind of awkward. It needed to be like 8 or 16. We
Hmm.
basically had to do it in sections of 8 because of the way Joe wrote it. So we really didn't feel, except for the very last day of the shoot, we shot the whole opening sequence. So that one was tough. We basically had to go through the entire studio, pretty much every single set, and relight them, or if we were lucky, I could keep certain things pre-lit from last time we were there type of thing.
Hmm.
And that day was rough, shooting 5, 6, 7 different sets in a 12-hour day. But
Hmm.
besides that, every other day was fairly simple. The only day we hit real overtime was kind of self-imposed. Without getting into spoiler alerts, there's a particular scene with a particular kill that has a particular object that gets thrown across the screen in slow motion,
Hmm.
and the way the object moved was just very, very funny, and the way it hits things was very, very funny. So we spent like an hour at the end of the day just shooting that in slow mo, just like kind of tracking it across the screen, and yeah, and then we looked at our watches like, oh shit, like we got to shoot tomorrow. Let's get everybody offset. Yeah, so
The
it wasn't that bad, and I've done unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you look at it, I've done so many movies in this like week long ish type of format
mhm.
that really not that difficult or not that uncommon for me and my crew to kind of make a movie at this pace. Like That's Rap was if I'm not mistaken, was my 30th feature film as a
Wow.
DP.
Wow. What is being a cinematographer DP? Well, since you wanted to do it since you were a kid, or how did you find
Uh,
this
so I
profession?
grew up I grew up in LA, and I knew for sure I wanted to work in the film industry. Just wasn't 100% sure when I was younger what exactly that meant. And then when I was in high school, I took a film class at my high school and learned, the basics of everything. Got my hands on stuff. Got to start actually making things and realizing how difficult it is and how important storytelling is and how important a good script is. And it made me realize that as much as I like making pretty images, because of course who doesn't like making pretty images, what I really
Mhm.
like is communicating ideas visually and telling stories through visual images. And that really kind of solidified my love of not just cinematography as a whole, but the idea of visual storytelling in kind of all of its formats. And
That's
then, from there was a question of how do I want to pay my bills, and directing. I absolutely love directing. It's a thing that I do still on the side when I get a chance, and hopefully in the future I've got some things coming up, and hopefully that all works out well, which would be nice. But I didn't necessarily want to be quote unquote a director at the start of my career,
Mhm.
because unless you're incredibly lucky, if you want to work in the narrative side of the world, you have to start your career off and working and making, for lack of a better word, bad films, movies
Sure.
that are intentionally cheap. I call them fast food movies. McDonald's serves a very important purpose in the economy of food, just like Asylum does.
For
The thing
sure.
people want, it's comfort food, it's cheap and it's simple and it's easy and they know what they're gonna get and they can get it anywhere across the world.
Hmm.
There's a place for that. And I love shooting those types of movies. I just didn't really want to direct those types of movies. So came the choice of which career path do I really, really want to take, even if I want to end up at the kind of end of my career having directed the movies that I want to direct. For this point in my career and for the foreseeable future, DPing has definitely been the right choice.
The horror aspect, everybody has a certain film that they found at a certain point in their life that led them to wanting to make horror movies, and the
Mm-hmm.
answer is never the same. Uh, was are you a horror movie fan, or was it just being a fan of movies and you happen to kind of get involved in more and more horror movies?
So it's actually the latter. Yeah, I didn't really grow up watching a ton of horror films. I watched, obviously the classics of them, and as part of my film education, made sure check off the boxes of all the important ones. And
Sure.
to answer the question of if any of them actually really kind of inspired me, Silence of the Lambs absolutely unquestionably blew me away the first time I saw it. The especially spoiler alerts for people who haven't seen Silence of the Lambs. The end of the film,
Mhm.
in the basement, the goggles, the point of view, the grab, like that just was as terrifying as a simple shot could be in my mind.
Mhm.
Same thing with Alien and Aliens, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant films. But I never considered myself a horror fan. And then coincidentally, the first feature that I had a chance to shoot wasn't really, the wasn't picking and choosing at the start of my career. First
For
feature I had a
sure.
chance to shoot was a horror film from a director who I done a couple of projects with, but did one of the Suspiria-based projects I did with this guy Brian Farmer as well, and that one was a slasher horror, cabin in the woods type of bunch of kids go out camping type of film.
Mhm.
And even though I had shot a little bit of horror type of stuff, that first experience with horror absolutely blew the doors open for me. It made me realize, as much as I love high drama and indie art drama, which is what I got into this business for, in the horror world, you can put a camera wherever you want to put a camera. You can put lights really wherever you want to put lights. There's a certain amount of freedom as long as you're scaring, as long as you're creating a tone, as long as you're whatever the point of that film is. There's a
Mhm.
certain freedom in the horror world that you don't get in any other genre. It's one of the things that I've just absolutely fallen in love with about it. And if you're clever about it, no two horror films are the same. So Neon Noir, the company that did That's a Wrap, we've done now 3 films together. Did a film a couple months ago called Garden of Eden that is much more like the A24 style elevated horror.
Mhm.
Midsummer is a big reference for that film as well. Absolutely, I haven't seen the whole thing yet. I've seen bits and pieces. We're getting close to the finish of the edit, and it's we'll definitely be talking about that one when it comes out, hopefully sometime next year.
Right
And
on.
then we just wrapped another one week or two ago in Vegas. That's like a Hills Have Eyes meets Texas Chainsaw 70s period piece horror. And
Nice.
those three films from the same team, same writer, director, lead actor, producer, DP, most of the same crew, could not be different films. And that's something that I really treasure in the horror world.
So when you say like names like Midsommar, it
Mm-hmm.
makes you think of like trippy effects and lens flares and LSDE. And then 70s Texas
Mm-hmm.
Chainsaw is that like classic film, gritty, dirty, like you feel dirty as you watch it through,
Mm-hmm.
the perspective. Like, do you have a certain, I mean, those are three distinct between those three movies. That's a
Mm-hmm.
Wrap, Garden of Eden, and the Texas Chainsaw one that you just finished
Mm-hmm.
in Vegas. Like, do you as a cinematographer have a certain aesthetic that you have kind of it's become your fave that you've gotten to play with?
So I actually really pride myself on the ability to genre jump. I think it's an unbelievably. I feel like I'm unbelievably lucky to be able to do it because most people get pigeonholed into, oh, you just do rom-coms, you just do sci-fi, whatever that thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I've been able to genre jump is because my kind of aesthetic things that I focus on are very, very simple and absolutely adaptable into kind of any genre. It's backlight, it's highlights, and it's focus on character and performance. And no matter what genre you're doing, all three of those things are important. All three of those things. Yeah, I joke around with my crew that the only difference between a horror film and a rom-com is how much fill light you use.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is roughly the same ideas. You still want to connect with characters. You still want to understand things from certain perspectives. Still want to create a tone. You still want to, I'm a huge believer in the importance of connecting to people's eyes. So you're going to want highlights, and then you take that a step further. What's the shape of the highlight? This is a thing that I learned from, and I'd also joke about this. I learned more from watching the Lord of the Rings appendices and the extended editions than I did from film school. There's just an absolute treasure trove. It's like 10, 15 hours of materials, just an absolute treasure trove of information. One of the things they were talking about, Andrew Lesney, the DP, was talking about for Galadriel, who's, for people who don't know Lord of the Rings well enough, a fantastical elf, queen type of creature who's supposed to be mystical and incredibly powerful and kind of connected to the universe. He wanted to do something special for her highlights. What they did was they took a C-stand and an arm, and they kind of put it out like this, and then wrapped it around with a bunch of Christmas lights. So she had basically star fields in her eyes as her reflections. And that's something that I've stolen for so many different movies because your eyes didn't see it, but your brain did. When you have these shapes in people's eyes, you can just do amazing, amazing things. So I did a World War II. It was basically like a Saving Private Ryan with a sci-fi twist to it. And the person they're going to go rescue is a Nazi scientist. Twist is a Nazi scientist that thought it was an Allied scientist. In the big reveal shot for her twist, we gave her practical red swastika highlights in her eyes, which just a lot of fun. So those are the types of things that I can kind of take from any project, put it into any genre, and say, great, as long as we've got clear separation from the background, as long as we can really connect with the person's eyes the way I want to connect with them, as long as fill levels are the way they need to be tone wise, everything else is just aesthetics of the very particular genre, a very particular type of film that we're trying to make here. Whether it's Midsummer, whether it's Suspiria, whether it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, whether it's a rom-com, sci-fi, action, it's all the same idea. It's all storytelling.
It's interesting that listening to you talk about that, because one of the projects we had to do in film school was have a single subject like you or I just sitting, and then take your light and light them in different areas and basically when you edit the video, because it's all just shot, cut, shot, cut, shot, cut. And then you edit the video to make it almost like stop animation where the light is traveling around the subject. And the point of that was just exactly to your point, is that just the simple, changing, like little tweaking, you're absolutely right. It can go from a horror movie, if you're lit from above and you're casting a shadow, to just a simple, TV sitcom if it's a flat and it's just basic. So yeah, without question, I totally get what you're saying with that kind of stuff. The whole highlight thing, I got to go back and re-look at Liv Tyler now and pay attention to how they lit her. I always took away the softness of how she looked, which is very much her character. Like she's but I'll have to pay attention more to see if I can find the Christmas lights in her eyes now.
It's for sorry, not for Liv Tyler's, for Galadriel is.
Oh God, yeah. I know what you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apologies for everyone who's listening who's making fun of us right now.
Yeah, I know. The fact that you've gotten to dabble in so many different genres is really cool. If you could pick one that you haven't gotten to yet that you really would love to, what would it be, would you say?
Yeah, so there's two big genres that I still haven't really touched yet. One is a sword and sandals, gladiator-esque type of epic. Definitely would love to do something like that. And the other one, I've never shot a musical, which is definitely on my list. Would really, really love to do that.
You have a favorite?
musical.
Yeah.
Um, on the stage, it's either Les Mis or Hamilton. It's just depending what day it is. It's hard for me to decide. For most of my life, it was Les Mis, but Hamilton is Hamilton, and
Yeah.
as close to perfection as anything been since Les Mis. But filmed, it would probably be Across the Universe. The
Okay.
first hour of that movie, like almost on the dot, 60:00:00 on the time code, is
Hmm.
just spectacular. And then it kind of, whatever, and then finds its way back at the end. But that first 60 minutes is just
Pretty, yeah.
absolutely spectacular.
It's a good movie.
Mm.
It's a lot of cinematic spectacularity, as they would
Yeah.
say. Um,
I'm a big music. Everyone knows, or everyone who's worked in film understands how important music is to the emotion of a film. If you've seen any movie without the score, it's just not a movie. It feels dead, it feels empty, it feels emotionless. And I've
yeah.
always found it very weird that you spend weeks, months, years working on a film, and then right at the very end, the very last thing you do is push it off to a composer and says, "Hey, make all the emotions of this movie work in like 2 weeks before we deliver." It
Dude,
just seems
yeah.
like such a weird way for the process to work. One of the things that I love about musicals is it intrinsically tells stories through the music. And
Hmm.
as a result, if you're doing it right, the music is brought in way earlier into the prep process, and you're designing around the music, which means you're designing around the emotion of the film rather than designing around images and what you think the emotion is going to be and then patching it up later.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's weird watching um, stuff that anybody has shot without music and sound effects versus
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between a home movie and a film, really. When
Oh yeah.
you, but with that, you as a cinematographer working on films, it sounded like you've had both experiences working on films with music that you know is going to be used. Have you gotten to do that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I wouldn't say most movies, but definitely I've done at this point in my life, I think it's 38, 39 movies, and I'd say maybe half of them have had at least one piece of music in there that during prep you said, hey, this whole sequence is gonna be cut to this song, so let's kind of keep that in mind as we're shooting it. But it's a little bit different than uh the more kind of choreographed, I guess is probably a better way to say it, musicals of we know for the next two measures of the song we're going to be in this close up, and then for the next three measures we're going to be in the wide. That's the type of very specific stuff I'm looking forward to doing.
The that whole thing, I remember a behind the scenes. I was interviewed with uh, James Gunn's the cinematographer for Guardians of the Galaxy,
Mm,
and there was an interview with him and James, and they were talking about how they gave Kurt Russell and Chris Pratt earwigs
mm,
that had the score for the scene that they were acting in, and how much that helped them, and then ipso facto helped the DP
mm.
and even James, direct and film it. Just so, there's a testament to how much that kind of stuff could help right there.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I actually haven't done a musical. Is because most of the stuff I work on doesn't want to spend the VFX budget of just painting out an earwig in everyone's ear for the entire movie.
Understandable.
Which is, but that's the right way to do it. Is you give the people you give the people the music, you give the performers, and if you design a movie intrinsically around the music, every single element of the film needs to also have that music as part of it as well, and very much including the actors. So,
This movie, that's a wrap.
mm,
We've talked on the psycho homage and the Argento aesthetic, but is there particular scene, the psycho homage aside,
mm.
whether it be another kill or just a way that you lit it, shot it, combination that you're really excited for people to like see?
Oh God, so many. There's yeah, this was a film where really every sequence we were proud of. There really isn't a sour note in this film, which is rare to say in kind of low budget worlds. So it's hard to kind of single out one. But if I did have to pick one thing to talk about, it'd probably be the end of the opening sequence where we kind of reveal our killer for the first time. We do all that rain, Suspiria rain color stuff I was talking about before as well, and the reason I wanted to single that scene out is obviously we're very happy with the way it looks, and it became a kind of an iconic It's like the poster shot of the movie. It was the teaser trailer, the teaser photo we released as well last year. All that type of stuff. But the reason it's so important to me is because it was a complete happy accident. Was not intending for that color to be there. Was not even remotely in my thought process whatsoever. We were setting up that shot. We had the rain going. Obviously, you need a backlight rain for you to see it. Kind of one of those 101 type of cinematography things. I was already planning to backlight the actor anyways, so it was same unit could do both. For backlights, I'm a big fan of 4-foot tubes. Put them right above somebody's head, right off camera. Gives you a really beautiful wrap around for hair lights. Just a great source that's super easy. You can arm it out anywhere. It's usually my go-to for backlights. And as we were cycling through the different light modes to get to the HSI mode, where we could pick what static color we wanted to use, which was the original plan, we cycled past the pixel effect mode, which gets preset to rainbow. And as soon as I pressed that button, we saw this rainbow look, and Marcel just completely gasped and said, "Nope, don't, whatever you're doing, stop. This is it. Whatever you're doing, this is the one we're going for." And we tweaked it around a little bit there to get the rainbow a little bit better, but it was such a better choice, because if we had done one flat color like we had kind of done for, that was one of the last shots of the whole movie we had done. So that actual setup was maybe like third, fourth to last setup of the whole film. And so for a week and change, we've been doing almost always static backlights, static colors, because we're using also streak filters for this film. And Marcel wanted, he wanted these streaks, so we wanted to see that type of stuff. And my thought process was, if we're changing colors a lot, then it gets really kind of in your face about it and kind of detracts away from the performance. And that's not really what we're looking for here. We're just looking to add a little bit of theatricality to it rather than a distraction. So I had never really thought for a second about doing a moving color. And then we got to that moment, and it happened to work so well, because each individual raindrop basically gets its own color. And it gives you this whole kaleidoscope of not only on the actor itself, but on the background of the actor as well. And that every single color at once is exactly the thing we were going for with the giallo aspect. We were not trying to be subtle in this movie. It's a meta horror comedy. We really kind of want to be punchy with everything. And this was just an iconic image to enter, or to exit the opening sequence with, of our killer standing in front of basically every color of the rainbow, and the water, and the way it hits the wig. And I just couldn't have been happier with it. And it's a really great lesson to kind of always keep in mind, no matter how confident you are in the look of the film, always be open to a new idea, to something better, to a happy accident. Because if I had stubbornly said, no, we're going to do the same thing we've done this entire film, the movie would be significantly less for it.
That is awesome, man. But everybody, with the amount of work that you have put in, who's listening or watching to this, I'm sure they're going to want to go and look up and see the stuff that you have done. Where can they, find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Marcus_Friedlander_DOP. IMDb obviously has all my stuff and links. If you click on a project, it'll tell you where you can watch it. Most of my stuff's on Tubi these days. Shout out Tubi, you guys are amazing. Been paying for pretty much everybody in the indie film world for the last couple of years, and we appreciate it.
I was gonna say Tubi's killing it right now.
Yeah, it's the second, literally yesterday, That's a Wrap got released onto Tubi for free with VOD. So if you want to watch That's a Wrap, you can go there. Also did a movie called The Get Back and Lord of the Streets for Tubi, which is on there as well, Tubi originals. Those ones are more actiony, definitely not horror, but also have a lot of fun color stuff, because I like lighting with colors. And if you want to look at my real resume, any of that type of good stuff, you can go to my website, www.marcusfriedlanderdop.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely gonna go watch That's a Wrap probably tonight. Now that I know it's up on Tubi, it's definitely been one of those ones, man. I'm telling you, the bigger sites, the Bloody Disgustings and stuff of that matter have covered the press for the movie, promoting it and stuff. I know I caught wind of it a couple weeks ahead of getting in touch with Jordan and the opportunity to get to interview you, and I was like, this looks like it's going to be a good watch. So the fact that it's already available upon the posting of this, it's the perfect time of the year for it to be available too. Everyone's doing their 31 Nights of Horror challenge. So everybody out there, make your night. What are we at? Tonight's the second, so this will get up on the third. Make your night 3 if you're watching. That's a wrap. And that
Absolutely.
um and yeah, man, I definitely would love to have you back on as you progress through the horror genre. It sounds like those two that you talked about definitely sound like ones that we could jam about as well because
Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to talking about Garden of Eden. I can't talk about anything right now because it's all very hush hush, but it was a movie that as we were shooting it, we kept looking at each other like, are we really shooting this stuff right? Like, God damn, this is and like I just watched the again, no spoilers, but I just watched the last sequence, and even though I know it's all fake because I was the one who shot it, with the sound design, with the score, it's fucking hard to watch.
wow. Okay.
It's brutal.
It's one of those ones that'll make your parents be like, damn.
So my parents are incredibly supportive. I'm very, very happy to say that. They also refuse to watch pretty much anything I do because I do a lot of like Lifetime type of stuff as well. My mom watches those; she loves those. But the big horror stuff, like there's a lot of torture porn elements to Garden of Eden that they will not enjoy in the slightest.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much again, man, for coming on. And I definitely look forward to you coming back on and talking Garden of Evil and down the line, the Vegas Hills Have Eyes Texas Chainsaw mashup. So
absolutely. That one's called Brute, by the way.
it's called Brute.
Brute, yes.
Brute. Okay. So there you
Yeah,
go.
would love to be back and chat more about these films. I love talking about them. They're a lot of fun to make. They're even more fun to talk about.
Right on, bro.
Hmm.
All right. We